Okay, so I've had some requests to do some videos on just a little how-to on fishing the jigs, any tips and stuff like that on fishing these. This will be for stock trout, particularly here in Southern California, but wherever you're fishing stock trout in the United States, it's pretty much the same thing. Um, so I'll start off with color selection, size selection, and then go from there. Um, if you're accustomed to fishing a 32nd ounce tube jig, you're going to want to fish our 16ths. And the reason being is a 32nd ounce tube jig weighs a little more than twice the amount of a feather jig. And if you go on the website, on our website, www.ghouliejigs.com, you'll see a photo on there on a scale where I show you in grams the difference between one of these and a tube jig. Now, 30 seconds are fine if you're right on top of the fish or you're float tubing, but if you're just bank fishing or you need to cast further, 16th ounce is what you want. And as far as color selection goes, I tell everyone don't worry about buying every color we make. Get yourself a couple natural dark colors and a couple bright colors. I've heard some people say, literally specific colors in the morning or in the evening. I don't go on that. Sometimes I'll tie, while I'm waiting in line at Dixon, I'll tie a yellow on my line, or sometimes I tie a black. I kind of just look at what the weather is doing. If it's cloudy or if it's sunny, that kind of stuff. You can do your own research as far as that goes. That's a whole nother video. Anyhow, a lot of times it is the bright colors early in the morning, but I've had plenty of mornings at Dixon where it's going to be a nice sunny day and that death dealer is just automatic first cast, bam, 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 right away. So just go with your gut on that, but always have a couple, brights and a couple naturals, and you should be good to go. Sometimes they don't want the brights at all. Sometimes they don't want the naturals at all. So you want to be prepared. Also, I wouldn't say to buy all stingers. The stinger jigs that we make with the double hook, I wouldn't say buy all of those. I always say at least have a couple packs on deck. Because if you're out there and it's like, I know you've been out there jig fishing and every other cast it's ding ding, little short taps. 90% of those fish are going to get screwed over with that stinger hook. It's just a fact. I've watched it happen 100 times now, and just this year alone. So make sure you have a couple packs of stingers, and then some naturals and some brights. So I would say the 16th is probably the way to go. And when it comes down to retrieves, jig fishing is not an exact science. It changes all the time, especially if you're there on the day they stock, the day after, or the week after. The week after, obviously, you have to work a lot more for it, especially now. Trout fishing is super popular and the lakes get really pressured. So keep that in mind. But your standard jig bounce is a nice steady rhythm with your rod, nice bounce with your rod tip, and a nice steady retrieve. Whatever your speed of your reel is because you're trying to keep it in whatever water column the fish are in. If you can see the fish are 2 feet down, you're not going to want to reel like this, because your jig's going to be all the way at the top, and you're not going to want to be doing this because your jig's going to be on the floor. So the speed of your retrieve depends on where the fish are. Your bounce depends on what the fish want. Sometimes they just want a nice steady ding, 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 ding all the way through the water. Okay, and that works just fine. That's just your mini jig retrieve, like a plastic tube jig. Same thing. Sometimes I've noticed they don't want any bounce. Sometimes I keep my rod pretty straight and I just kind of do like a nice steady reel in, so my jig is literally just swimming through the water. Sometimes that works. Sometimes I'll do that same thing, but a little bit of an up and down wobble, where my jig is kind of just like this through the water. And sometimes that does it. Now, one of my most successful and the funner retrieves, in my opinion, for myself, is I kind of come to the side with my rod, like pop, 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 and I kind of keep like a nice medium retrieve going, or sometimes I'll speed it up. And whenever I'm working a spoon, a crankbait, this retrieve with our jigs, I'm not doing the same speed the whole way in. I'm going to go slower and then faster, slower and then faster. If you've ever been at Dixon on a boat and thrown a spoon and been going slow and seen a couple fish maybe just trailing, and then all of a sudden you reel it in because you're going to cast again, so you're going fast, and you watch that fish take off. Keep that in mind. When you're doing a retrieve, remember everything that you see fish do. That's the benefit of fishing a clear water lake and sight fishing, is you get to watch what these fish are doing with your lure. Whether you can, learn from it or not, I say watch what the fish are doing. If you can watch the fish speeding up after your lure, when you're coming into cast again, then that tells you that you need to speed up your retrieve a little bit. So always keep that in mind, and that's for any lake. I don't care if it's murky or clear. If you've been fishing jigs at a lake for over an hour and had no bites, and you've been doing the same thing the whole morning, change it up. Time to change it up, whether it's change colors, which is usually my go-to. I usually change colors before I change retrieves. If I'm throwing a black jig first thing in the morning and I've gone 15 casts, and especially if I've seen a couple other people catch or get bit, then I'm going to probably change my color and go complete opposite to a bright. Whether it's white or yellow or pink, I'll go complete opposite. And then if I go another 10, 15 casts and I'm still not getting a bite, then I'll change my retrieve. You know, I'll start going faster or slower, but I typically want to change my color before my retrieve, and then you go from there. So, for instance, if we're fishing at Dixon and the fish are 3 feet below the surface, so they're kind of like in the coves there, that would be like almost mid-water column, you know, towards the top-ish. I'm usually going to cast out, let it sink down a few feet, and I'm just going to start with the standard mini jig retrieve. Start with your basic, and then step up from there. So standard mini jig retrieve, 10, 15 casts, I'm not really getting a bump. Okay, maybe they're just not liking that color. I switch colors, do it again. Now I'm going to try this one. I'm going to try faster. Maybe they want something, maybe they want to chase something. Okay, and if that doesn't work, maybe you need to move spots. Maybe the fish are shut down. Sometimes you just really have to work for those fish. So always change your speed, always change your color. If you've been changing your speed and that's not working, then go with a color change. Now, clear water lakes, you can typically see the fish, so you'll kind of get an idea of what they're doing and where they're at. Murky water, like Wolford, for instance, I just know they're on the bottom. If you know murky water lakes, the bottom foot or two of the lake is usually the clearest part. I don't know why, but the middle section's murky, the top's murky. That bottom section will be clearer, and that's where the fish are feeding, especially if you see the guys drop shot minnow or power bait or night crawler they're catching, the fish are down deep. Let your jig hit the floor and kind of do subtle pops, pretend this is the floor bottom, subtle pops off the floor while you're reeling in real slow. Start with that, that's your base, and then maybe lift it up and reel a little faster so now it's up here. You know, maybe bounce the rod a little heavier, you know, a little more bounce while you're reeling in, okay? And a lot of that is all practice, okay? Can you do this? Okay, that should be something that you should know how to do, because I watch people jigging sometimes and they're like, you know, it's all over the place. The rod is everywhere, the reel is everywhere. It's got to be consistent. Whatever you're doing on that retrieve needs to be the same. If you're doing this, it needs to look like that all the way in. A fish is trailing it because they think it's real and they want to eat it. If it's doing all kinds of wacky stuff, they're not even going to bother. So you might not be having success on any jigs for that reason. Practice your cadence. Make sure your cadence is dialed in, and then you might have some more success. So murky water lakes, you're going to fish more towards the bottom. You're going to fish a little slower. Okay, clear water lakes, you're going to fish. Sometimes you have to find the column. You don't know where they are. Sometimes you got to find it. So once you find the water column, then work on your retrieve, your cadence. You know, is it bouncing aggressive? Is it barely moving? Is it not moving at all? The benefit to a ball head style jig like this is you can work it fast in, and it'll have this darting straight motion instead of trying to spin or dip out. So keep that in mind. You can work these a little faster, and a lot of times I have success really cranking it in. I mean, if you've ever seen me at Dixon, I rarely am doing the same thing all the time. You'll see me over there like this, and you might think I'm throwing a jerkbait or something, but I'm just throwing one of our jigs and just ripping it, and when you hook up like that, it's really fun. So I hope I answered or gave some good info in this video. If I didn't, if you didn't learn shit, feel free to message me or email me, and I can help you out more. If you have any specific questions, just reach out and ask. It doesn't hurt. I'm here to help. I want you to be successful on our jigs. So please do ask the questions. All right, thank you.